You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/kidsandfamily. Just go to Indeed.com/kidsandfamily right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Are you ready to learn the 3 secrets to launching a successful podcast? Hi, I'm Bill, a recent client of the Podcast Mogul. If you've been thinking about starting a podcast but aren't sure where to begin, he's got you covered. He is hosting a free webinar where he will share the 3 secrets that can help you launch, grow, and monetize your podcast without any fancy equipment or technical headaches. Click the link in the show notes to save your spot now and let him help get your podcast off the ground.
But I was claimed by, this is what you should be doing. And I wouldn't change it for the world right now. And it's difficult for some people to hear me say some things because I often say I wouldn't change anything that I went through either.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Season 3 of Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm, of course, Phil Better, and this season is presented to you by Unicorn Incubator. Unicorn is the largest rural incubator accelerator of its kind in the world, located in southwestern France. Its mission is to give entrepreneurs and their families their lives back while helping them build game-changing technology startups. Startups in the company are provided with a complete ecosystem for success, with direct access to proven funding sources, top-notch legal and accounting representation, access to the world's most generous business incentives, and most importantly, a dedicated sales and marketing accelerator that will put a startup's product or service on the fast track to success. Welcome back to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm, of course, your host with most Phil Better, and today we're investing in Dean Fox, the code cracking coach. Dean is an entrepreneurial coach who has helped hundreds of fellow entrepreneurs and business owners achieve their goals in only 45 days. We get to talking about his journey from being a national sales manager, owner of a multi-6-figure property business, to the car crash that changed his life and to where he's going now. This is an amazing conversation that I have. I'm so happy I had a chance to talk with Dean. Here's a little bit more about him. In 2007, Dean had been a national sales manager for a major company and built a multi-6-figure property business. But just a few years later, he lost the business, was bankrupt, almost killed in a car accident, and contemplating suicide. By immersing himself in personal development over the last decade, Dean is now a leading international mind performance coach, trainer, consultant, and speaker. Dean uses his own personal experience and the unique Crack the Code program to help entrepreneurs and business owners end procrastination, perfectionism, fear of public speaking, and fear of rejection permanently in 45 days or less, so they can take inspired action to achieve all their goals and dreams. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this is Dean Fox.
Dean, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being a guest. Before we start, do you want to just give your quick elevator pitch about who you are to my audience so that they know who we're listening to today?
Yeah, for sure. So it's always a pleasure to be here and share some of my story. I'm effectively a performance coach and a mindset strategist. So I work with business owners and entrepreneurs. I help them overcome what I believe are the 4 key issues that most business owners and entrepreneurs face in terms of getting where they want to be. And that's procrastination, perfectionism, fear of public speaking, and fear of rejection. And we have a program that allows them to do that in less than 45 days, working alongside myself. So that's our focus right now in terms of what we do to help people get where they want to be.
I love it because I know fear of public speaking is a lot of people's and a lot of business owners. They have that fear. And as a podcaster, I don't really, because I'm on a daily basis public speaking. So I've lost that fear many years ago. But I love that you're helping entrepreneurs and business owners crush that fear, because I think it's one that's holding a lot of people back from reaching their full potential and sharing the knowledge they have.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a big believer in that everyone has a story. We all have a story within us, and our story's not for us. The story's for other people. It's designed to help other people. Something I learned over the last few years in particular. And so, when people struggle to be able to share that, they're not being of service. They're not being able to provide that value to other people.
So true, yeah, because they lose out. Not just them, but everybody else loses out from their knowledge, because knowledge is now easily accessible for everybody and easy to share, either through blogging, podcasting, YouTube's public speaking, which you offer. So it's great that you're actually helping these people, business owners and entrepreneurs, crush those goals so that they can be part of the history.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. The four key things for me, just based on my own experience of working with other entrepreneurs, is they're the biggest things that I struggled with, but they're also the ones that come up time and time again when I'm working with people. Most of my referrals come from people who have experienced that themselves, overcome it, and then met somebody else or referred me to someone else they know struggling with it as well.
Yeah, no, it's the perfect word of mouth. Marketing is still the most powerful marketing, and you don't have to spend billions of dollars to market yourself. Otherwise, just keep helping one person, and they'll keep bringing back people to you, and sooner or later you'll be the person in ending either public speaking, perfectionism, which I'm still dealing with myself, because grew up in the world of the generation of it has to be perfect. You have to get perfect marks, perfect everything. So yeah, that's something I'm battling with already, and getting better, getting better. But it's good to know that there's someone. If I had known, I would have been able to take your course, and maybe I will, because it's still extra tools in my tool case.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So originally back, I'm reading a bit of your bio here, because I'm smart that way. Keep the bio fresh so that you have the questions. It says you started off as a national sales manager for
Yeah.
a major corporation. And what was that like? Like, because you ended up having like a big loss, like a downward. It seemed like a downward spiral. I'm guessing just after the market crashed. What was it like? Like, what lessons did you learn that able to show that you could kick the door and come back even better?
Yeah, I think that there's a number of things. My career in the corporate world, I developed what I call this when then mentality. So I was always looking for, when I've achieved this, then I'll feel successful, then I'll feel good enough, then I'll be able to prove to people, that I am good enough. But it never happened. So whenever I achieved something, I then didn't feel any different, and it would be like, okay, well, it must be this then. I need to go and do this. So you just kind of keep moving forward. And I'd had a good career, so from the outside, people would say, oh, you've got you've got a good sales position, you've got a company car, expense account, nice home.
Mhm.
But I never really felt like I was fulfilled. I never felt like that was what I should be doing. It was always, well, there must be something else. And so in the early 2000s, I made the decision that, my next when, if you like, my next when then was, well, if I left the corporate world and I did this for myself, so if I became an entrepreneur, went into business and I became successful myself, then I'd prove that I was successful, that I was good enough. So that was my next when. So I left the corporate world in the early 2000s. My wife and I set up a property development and investment company in the UK, so a real estate business. And we grew that over about a 6-year period to multi six figures. It was growing really well. We had ambitions to make it into a 7-figure business and beyond. And then 2008 happened. I don't think anybody foresaw the shift that would make. In the same way that we've over the last 12, 14 months. I don't think anybody foresaw the shift that would make either. And so there's a lot of kind of similarities between what I went through then and lessons I've learned for this time around almost. But during that period, the whole world changed from a financial perspective. So, our strategies, the processes we used, they all changed overnight. So, our model didn't work from one day to the next. But then also, we were put under real pressure by some of the financial institutions because lots of them just withdrew from the market. That left us in, difficulties with ongoing projects and finances. And so over the course of 2009, we ended up losing that business. And I made a decision at the end of 2009 that in order to kind of get through things, to ride the storm, see it out, I'd go back into the corporate world. So I'd said to my wife, look, I think the plan is I'll just go and get a job again. It might not be at the level I was before, but I could probably get a sales job. That will see us through and we'll see what happens, over the next few years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my plan. That's what we planned to do. So I started in early 2010 to look for opportunities. And then in March of 2010, my wife, myself, and my youngest son, we were almost killed in a car accident.
That's
a
big event.
Yes, it is. And it was a fairly serious accident. The road we were traveling on, they closed that road for 5 hours. It took just over 2 hours to cut us from the car we were traveling in. My youngest son, he was airlifted to the hospital because they thought he was going to lose a leg. And that did a number of things. So obviously it prepared to me going back into the corporate world for a period of time. So I had several months of recovery physically. But that also added more financial pressure to us. I wasn't working, my wife wasn't working, the business had gone, still had outgoings for a home and a family. And despite the fact that, we had a lot of support from friends and family, it's not a never ending money tree that people can just provide from.
Yeah.
And so, the two things had to happen. We made some really difficult decisions. So I promised the family that we wouldn't lose our home. So one of the things that we did as part of the business we had was to build our own home. And I said to them we wouldn't lose that. And so I took some advice and said, I need to keep this. What are my options? And it ultimately transpired that the only way we would be able to do that would be effectively to lose everything else. And so that's what happened. We lost everything else. We gave back the cars, the other properties we had. We lost all the finances that we had. I ended up personally bankrupt. So that was one aspect of what happened in 2010. The other thing was that the stress that placed upon me and the family, but taken by me, and the issues around not being able to go back and contribute in some way physically, and then being kind of sat for 7 or 8 months with your own thoughts and not being able to do anything was left me in a very difficult place. My mental health suffered.
Could only imagine.
And it kind of came to a head. So in December of 2010, I said to my wife that I got up one morning and said, I need to go for a walk. I need to clear my head. I need to kind of think a little bit about what we're going to do next, what our plan is. That wasn't the truth. The truth was I left the home that day. I never intended to come home. I went to some woodland near where we lived, and I'd made a decision I was going to take my own life. But something happened that day. When I was sitting there, when I made the decision that that's what I was going to do, I was just sitting in a clearing in some woodland, and it was almost as if it was a kind of surreal moment, but it was almost as if somebody lifted all of those stresses, worries, and pressures off, if you like, and then said, I'm going to give you a minute to reflect on this without any of that to think about. Because I had this sensation of being really calm and really relaxed and, not under any pressure, very peaceful. And I don't know whether that lasted a few seconds or a few minutes, but ultimately what it did was it led me to ask myself some questions. The biggest one being, I could have died in a car accident 8 months ago, and I didn't. Why was that? Why am I going through all these things right now? What's, what, for what reason? Why am I experiencing these things? And that kind of got me to start thinking, maybe I should find the answers to those questions, or try and find the answers to those questions. So that's what brought me back, really, was to find some answers to those questions. And my journey from there on in was never about becoming a coach or a speaker or any of those things. It was about finding some answers for myself. And so I invested everything I had, and including time, in pursuing, those answers, trying to develop personally, understanding how we think, why we do the things we do, why often we don't do the things we think we should do or know we should do, what drives our behavior, why do we believe certain things about ourselves? And the answers to those questions, as I started to find them and make changes in my life, and then share them with people that were close to me, so my wife and my children and my close family, and they started to do things, make changes in their life, people started to notice that, and then ask me if I would share my story. Would you come and share what you've gone through? And I started to do that, and then people would approach me afterwards and say, that really resonated with me. Do you think you could help help with this thing I'm struggling with? And we sat down, I'd share some advice, and they'd make some changes. And I suddenly realized, I have this saying that I don't think we find a purpose. People are under a lot of pressure right now, I think, to find their purpose.
Yeah.
I don't think we find a purpose. I think a purpose finds us. I think our only job is to be open to it and take action when it presents itself. When it says, I'm here, our job is to say, okay, and I'm ready.
Yeah.
And that's all that happened. I didn't have any express intention of doing what I do now at the time. But I was claimed by, this is what you should be doing. And I wouldn't change it for the world right now. And it's difficult for some people to hear me say some things, because I often say I wouldn't change anything that I went through either. And the reason for that, so I was on a podcast recently, and someone said to me, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Yeah.
And I said, I'd tell them that everything will be okay. And everything that happens to you is meant to happen to you. And you'll never know when it happens to you what the bigger picture is for that. But trust that there is one. And it will work out the way it's supposed to. You'll end up where you're supposed to be. Because that's what I believe. And so now when I look back at some of those events, people say, how can you be grateful that you were almost killed in a car accident? And I say, because if I didn't, I might not have been doing what I'm doing now. In fact, I wouldn't have been doing what I'm doing now. But also, it might have led me in somewhere else. Those were all times when, however you want to refer to it, the universe, God, whatever it was, they were all times when I was given a nudge to say, that's not where you should be going. That's not where you should be going.
Your purpose is over here. Let's get you to your purpose. So if I have to, like like the universe, God, whoever, whatever you believe in, was trying probably throughout your life, trying to nudge you, saying, look, this if then it's not working, brother. Like, this isn't where you're supposed to go. Then they were like, okay, I'm bringing out the big guns. We're going to do this.
Yeah, for sure.
And it now puts you into a place where you're helping a hell of a lot more people because of what you're doing, and you're showing them to build and become a better person for them, which they'll pass on and help other people.
And I genuinely believe that I was given opportunities and didn't take them, nudges, chances to move, and I didn't. And so it was a case of, well, if you're not gonna listen when I give you these ideas, I'm actually going to do something to force you over there. And that's kind of what happened. And I genuinely believe that that's why we end up where we are.
I fully, I feel that 2020 was my, not as grave as yours, but it was a big enough nudge for me to realize, okay, I have to make changes in my life. I had a burnout at the end of 2019. Going into 2020, I took time off for my mental health, and I just came through 2020 because of remote work. I found out that I have a lot more time to do side hustling, and figured out that podcasting is my side hustle. So, but I also get to interact with these amazing entrepreneurs like yourself who have these wonderful stories about overcoming these, in my eyes, monumental events and come out stronger and better and wiser for it. So like, this is something I'm sharing. Like, if I can make money off it, great. If not, I still get to share these stories with a larger audience so that more people can learn and be better for themselves. Because you may not be an entrepreneur, you may be a business owner, and maybe something resonates with you.
Yeah, for sure. And I often say that, when I'm working with people, people say to me, is there a particular size of company? Is there a particular industry? And I say, no, there isn't. There's an individual, and my job is to find them and help them, in the same way that I was found, if you like. But yeah, I agree, and I think there's lots of similarities, in terms of the way that we look at things between what's happened over the last 14 months and what happened in 2008. I look back now at 2008, and in the same time frame. So, I lost a multi-six-figure business in 2008 and 9. Yet in the same time frame as I was losing that business, there were people launching businesses that have now gone on to be billion-dollar brands. And so it cannot have been the environment. It cannot have been the economy. It can't. And yet all I saw was challenges. I saw no opportunities in that time. I only saw difficulties. And so, the thing that I learned massively from then is that, I talk a lot about, I try and talk in analogies that allow people to see things the way that I see them. But, if you imagine being at the start line of the 110-meter hurdles, when everyone looks up, all they see are hurdles. The difference between those who succeed as an entrepreneur or business owner and those who don't in those challenging times are, they ask themselves a different question. So for some people, those hurdles are in the way. So in 2008, for me, they were in the way. That's all I saw. But for other people, those hurdles are on the way.
Oh, I
They're
like
on the
that.
way there to where they want to be. And it's a small shift, but it's a huge difference in what happens to people. I shared something with on social media today, actually, that came from one of my clients, where he was talking about this idea of how he felt after we'd spoken at one of our sessions, and we talked about these little shifts, if you like. So that, that type of example where it's a small shift, but it can have a kind of a huge impact in what you do. And it was interesting to hear his reflection on something. So it was just the simple difference between two sentences. So one of the things he said was that his phrase was, I think the problem is there's something wrong with me. And I said, okay, fair enough. And then we did a bit of work together. And then he said, okay, I now see that actually that's not the right statement. The statement should be, the problem is, I think there's something wrong with me. And I shared it today because they sound the same.
But there's a monumental difference when you understand the power that your words have. You're shifting the blame from you in the first one and saying, no, I'm working on a problem that may not be a real problem.
Yeah, for sure. The first one says there's something wrong with me. That's what I think the problem is. The second one says the problem is I think there's something wrong with me. So it's not that there is something wrong with me. There's just a problem that I think there is. And if you figure that out, that's a huge shift. And so the impact of that in people's lives and businesses is massive. Yet it's just a small shift.
Oh my God! I'm so thankful. That's like that's the tease at the beginning. That those two words at the beginning of the episode. That's the tease. I already have my hook point for people because if I heard that, I'm already sold for the episode. So thank you for giving me the easiest hook for an episode. But yeah, it's the power of words. It's amazing that we're kind of learning. More and more people are becoming aware of it. I feel that what you say, it has power.
Yeah, and I think that the problem for most of us, the way that I've kind of learn to understand some of this stuff is that 99% of what we believe about ourselves isn't true. We develop this belief system usually when we're about 5 or 6 years old. So scientifically, if you look at any work on this subject, it tells you that children form their belief and their personality, their identity, by the time they're about 6 years old, maybe 7 at a push. But from that point on, all we ever do is look to validate that the things that we believe about ourselves are the truth. So we only see those things in the world. So when people believe something, that's all they'll ever see. So, I've worked with clients who say things like, I'm trying to think of a specific phrase, but they see things where, that becomes a problem for them. So, let's take fear of public speaking.
Oh yes, that's a big one.
So there's beliefs that sit underneath the fear of public speaking, which are aligned with things like, if I make a mistake or fail, I'll be rejected. So that's one of the beliefs that sits under that pattern of behavior. Now, the problem with that is that, I've done this with lots of people, business owners, and I've said to them, can you think of numerous times where you've made a mistake or failed and not being rejected? And after a few moments of thought, they'll say, yes, I can think of times of that. Okay. So it cannot be true that every time you make a mistake or fail, you will be rejected. No, that's not true. Okay. Yet you believe that if I make a mistake and fail, I'll be rejected. And so what happens is we have what's called confirmation bias. We ignore everything that disproves the belief and only see the things in our life that prove that to be true. So what we've believed or learned about ourselves as a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old child is driving our behavior, as an adult. And so when I'm working with, a business owner, for example, I often ask them the question, would you take business or life advice from a 5-year-old?
Generally, no. I tend to, I love my nephew, but I don't think he's experienced enough, in the world.
Yet the problem is, that's what we're doing on a daily basis. Every one of us takes business and life advice from our 5-year-old self. The things that we believed back then are what are driving our behaviors right now. And that's what's giving us our results.
I wasn't expecting a whole woke moment here. That's wow. Like obviously doing self-improvement and understanding and learning about myself and where I my purpose is. I intrinsically figured that out, but I've never had it put into words like you just did. And that's just like a heavy hit.
Yeah. And when I often say that you can, there's ways of knowing things. And often I hear people say they agree with me, or, I'll be working with a client and they'll say, yes, I understand that. But they're only saying I understand it from an intellectual level. And I often say, I've done it myself. I've read things in books and gone, yeah, that makes sense. I understand that, but never really understood it. And then when you suddenly hear somebody say something exactly the same, but in a slightly different way, or even the same words sometimes, and then you suddenly resonates, you suddenly have a deeper understanding of it. And it's like, right, okay, now I get what that means.
It's like you need the experience of life to really connect the two things. Like if you read, one of my favorite books is The Art of War. And so there's you read it and you're like, oh, okay, this is why business people read it, because it's this amazing strategy. But rereading it over time, every couple of years, new lessons pop out to you and you connect with it and you're like, I did that. You end up creating the examples in your own life so that it makes a better connection for you.
Yeah. So I talk about these 3 things that, the first way of knowing something is cognitively. So intellectually we know something. The second way is to experience it. So we've got an experiential understanding. The third way though is to create or distinguish it for yourself. And when you get to that level, it's like, okay, that makes perfect sense now. Not just because I understand it here and I've experienced it on occasion, but now I've created examples for myself where I know that that's what that means. That takes it to a whole new level. I one of the books I started to read. So in fact, the day I came back from my walk that day, I picked a book up from the bookshelf, which was Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah, it's an amazing book.
Yeah, well, I'd read that book about 4 or 5 times before that day, that's a good example of never really kind of getting it or understanding it or implementing it or anything like that. Yet from that day, I mean, I've got several copies of it, but I read it every day. I've been reading it every day since 2010 because that every time I read it, I see something else because of my experience, something else. I create something else for me out of that book that then strengthens, okay, now I understand what they mean. Now I understand how that applies to life or how it applies to business. Um, and the more you experience those things, the deeper your understanding becomes. And I talk a lot about this idea that I don't ever, clients say to me, I've worked with you. The client I just mentioned today, his last message to me was, you've changed my life. And my answer to that is, I don't change anybody's life. First of all, I don't do anything. You do all the work. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, I don't believe that we change through personal development. I believe that we reveal. So we reveal who we truly are through personal development. We don't change ourselves. We just remove all the things we thought we should do and be and believe about ourselves. When we strip that away, all that's left is the truth about who we are. So for me, personal development's not about change. It's about revealing. It's about revelation.
Changing the skin, kind of
Yeah,
like humans, you're not the same person like you, that incident you had in 2010 versus now, you're nearly two new people because every 7 years we shed skin, our cells change. So you're not the same person you were 7 years ago or like 14 years ago, or like you said, when you were 5. You're not the same biologically. You're a completely different person with new experiences. So it's true
yeah,
what you're saying. Like, you're just helping them, you're the gardener. You're helping prune a little things by giving them the tools they need to fully come out and show who they are.
yeah, absolutely. And I believe that when you get to that stage and you're able to, um, your passion or your purpose finds you, and you're able to stand in that space, if you like, and be okay with it, and be comfortable with it, and shine your light. That's when things change. When you become, that's when you can serve others. And it's that, Jim Rohn says, service to many leads to greatness. And that's, for me, that's what it's about. I talk a lot about, in my early days in coaching, even when when I first started to realize, okay, this is what I want to do, I did what everyone else does in business. I had to make a living. So I went out to try and find clients and build a business. But I heard something by somebody else, and there's two quotes that have massively resonated with me over the years. One was by Denzel Washington,
Mm-hmm.
who said, "Don't aspire to make a living, aspire to make a difference." And it's on my office wall. It's like, it's the thing that I kind of almost live my life by. This idea that, making a difference is what drives me, not making a living. Making a living comes from me making a difference.
Yeah,
And
if
the bigger,
you're making a difference, the money will come and support you, and that's all that matters.
yeah, and the bigger the difference I make, the more the money will come.
Mhm.
That's the way it works. So that's the first one. And the second one was this idea that I'd heard from several people, but really resonated from a coach of mine. And he said that, when you consider a lighthouse doesn't run all around the island trying to find ships to save. It just stands there and shines its light, and it attracts the ships that need it. And I was like, again, you hear things, and it's like, okay, I now get that.
Yeah,
I don't need to be chasing all over the place looking for clients. I need to stand and shine on what I do, and people will find me because they'll be looking. That's
I
how it works.
that's an amazing thing, and I love how you said a coach of yours. You're showing, like, yes, you're a coach and you coach others, but you're still open to being coached because you're, like you said, you're not perfect. You're still learning. You're still growing. You're cross pollinating with other locations because as your business grows, you're attracting other customers or other clients, and maybe you don't know fully about their business, but together they're mentoring you as you mentor them in getting their business in order. So now you have this template, if you will. So if ever you have another client similar to him or that person, you can help them because you already have it there to help.
And I talk about this whole idea that we're part of this journey, our own personal journey, which has different phases of it, and at different phases you will need different support. You'll need different people to help. Um, that's not to say that you outgrow someone, or it's just you need somebody different at that point in your journey. And so I continue to evolve and develop and grow, and therefore I'm continually looking for the right people to be able to support that growth. And if I want to learn something, I'll seek somebody out who I believe has what I'm looking for, and I'll be able to learn from them.
Yeah.
And I think that's true, or should be true. I think whether you're in the coaching space or whether you're just in business, collaboration and connecting with people. I learn something every day. If there's a day goes by, or I ever get to a day where I say, okay, I'm done, I know everything, then I'll know that that's the
I'm the
biggest
tap
mistake
out.
I could ever make. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we can't. We should be learning something every day. We should actively be looking to, how can I fail today? How can I make a mistake today? What can I learn for myself or from somebody else? And for me, that's what keeps us moving forward.
What I love about this podcast is I get to learn about something. Usually every day I learn 3 new things because I have 3 guests every day. So that's for me, I'm like, how can I maximize my learning today? And luckily by talking to amazingly interesting people like yourself and other guests that I have on the show, I get to learn different aspects of coaching, because you're a different coach than 8 coaches that I had, or interviewed before. You're a different story. Like, you went from being this then that person, similar to what I feel I did in my career, but luckily I had a minor bip to get me back on, and I found my purpose, if you will, sharing the stories of others, because it's helping everybody. And hell, maybe you are the exact coach that one of my listeners needs, and they go, that story resonates with me. I'm going to reach out to him because, Phil had him as a guest. So like, that is something I love. So this is great.
Yeah, and I think that that's where you find your purpose finds you, and then it aligns you with the other parts of what you need in order to find the right people.
Yeah.
Whenever you need something, it shows up at the right time.
It's true. It's true. And it's, oh my God, this was like a therapy session, a great podcast session. I loved it. It was like a coaching session, without like fully coaching, you just sharing your ideas, and it just helped. This is what I love about podcasting. It's one of the best things. So what's next for you and your coaching? Like, what are you what's something you're excited to once COVID, let's say 2021, everything's done, vaccinated, the world's great. What's your next thing? Like, what is the then, if you will, of your old statement? Because you already have your happiness. Like, what's next?
Yeah. So we one of the things I spent the last probably 6 or 7 months of lockdown working on, I've spent probably 2 to 3 years doing it, but I really focused over the last kind of 6 months, was that a large proportion of my work is delivered face to face, one to one, and I want to have a bigger impact. So I've been trying to figure out, how can we do that? How can we have a bigger impact? How can we work with more people? But there's only me, so we've got limited time. And I always stayed away from doing or having an online program, an online version of what we did, because I always felt it would be too impersonal, and what I did was quite personal.
Mm-hmm.
But we piloted some things last year, where I kind of so basically so about 80% or 90% of my clients prior to COVID were delivered virtually. Most of my clients are based in either the US or Europe. I've got some in the UK. And so most of my client work is done like this. And so after a period of time, a number of clients were saying, could you record the session, and can you send me a copy of it afterwards so that I can go back in and use it? And I was like, yeah. And so I started to realize that, okay, well, maybe if we developed program where it is physically like me coaching. So they still get, it's only like they're looking at a screen like this and they answer the same questions. All right, they've got to do the work and they've got to answer the questions. But if we did that and then we give them a platform for them to be able to query things if they didn't understand something, could we get a similar result? And so we piloted that a bit last year, and that's kind of our next project. So we're launching the first full version of that in April, which will be a hybrid program, which will be an online version that allows us to reach more people without allowing me to, or requiring my input on a one-to-one basis. And the second thing is that in order to reach people and share some of that message and for people to find out about it, I used to run most of my methods of client attraction were through speaking or either on events that I ran or other people's stages or podcasts and things like this. But all of the events that I used to run face to face have had to stop, and so we spent a bit of time testing some of those events as well. So I used to run, I've run 1-day events, some 2-day events. We've tested various bits and pieces, and then we've kind of chopped bits out and put things in to try and get an event that we think fits with people. So over the last 3 months, 4 months now since we started testing it, we've been running a 3.5 hour half-day masterclass once a month on the last weekend of every month, just to allow more people to get access to it. We provide some good content in there, actionable stuff that people can use and take away, but it also gives me an opportunity to interact with them and they can find out a little bit more about the program that we're launching. So that's kind of really exciting for us. That's a next phase for us, is in terms of being able to have a bigger impact and make a bigger difference with more people across the world.
That's amazing. Like I was going to ask you, like, are you like, how are you? I love how you're like creating the content, and it may be generic, but it's actionable advice through examples that you provide, so other people will be able to get that correlation and create those connections through their lives instead of just reading it, the example in the book, and they're like, this doesn't affect me at all. So I love how you're doing that, kind of like a mini Tony Robbins big thing, but specifically for good business owners, and that's awesome.
So yeah, we're excited to launch that, and people can find out about that at my website, or they can reach out to us through social media. We're on all the main channels, so Facebook, Instagram, and Clubhouse.
I love Clubhouse. Clubhouse is great. I'm going to start following you. I forgot that you were on Clubhouse, so looking forward to connect on that. So Dean, I want to thank you so much. We're coming up to the end of the episode. You already provided us with more wisdom and knowledge throughout this whole episode than I was already expecting. So just saying to anybody who's found any value in this, please go check Dean out. His links are in the show notes down below. Follow him, because I'm following him and he does post amazing content that actually makes you think and keeps you going and helps you make those connections. So I want to thank Dean for being a guest on the show. And Dean, you're always welcome back on the show anytime.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for the invite.
You're very welcome.
Hey everybody, I am so thankful that I got to talk with Dean, and we've communicated since this episode was recorded. Please do a favor and go and check out his website. It's very simple, deanfox.com or deanfoxcoaching.com. I promise you this will be one of probably the best investments of your life. So without further ado, guys, remember to invest in yourself.
Thanks for tuning in. Now it's time to take the next step. When you're ready to dive deeper into how to launch, grow, and monetize your podcast, Phil's got something special for you. Join him for a free webinar where he'll reveal the 3 secrets that have helped countless entrepreneurs succeed in podcasting. Click the link in the show notes to save your spot, and let's turn your podcasting dreams into reality.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/kidsandfamily. Just go to Indeed.com/kidsandfamily right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.